How is my audio, by the way?
Sounds normal. Sounds good.
We'll wait till we get...
You always sound great to me, Lunasar, but I'm a big fan to begin with.
Thanks. No, I did first open up Discord's audio, and it sounded terrible, and I moved it just barely moved it, and then it did.
Discord's been weird lately. A couple of weeks ago, I had an issue where I couldn't hear anything except you guys, and I thought it was my headset.
Hi,
And,
Lizzie.
that's when I muted stuff, and and when I changed everything. But turns out that Discord when I told Discord to just do the default, it's like, okay, but then we'll do your default, and then nothing else can use your default. And so when I told it specifically, okay, just use this headset, then everything could use the headset, apparently.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, Discord's really weird and finicky with plugging in a microphone.
Like, this is new, because, like, this has worked forever, and then this is just suddenly 3 weeks ago. It just decided this is how it works now.
All right. Hey, Lizzie, how is everyone's audio relative to one another? If I could get myself to
in
talk
the
right
chat.
here,
Okay.
and then Baggins, could you say a full sentence, maybe with a commentary on what you had for dinner? So no dinner.
That wasn't enough. I don't think I
Well-
had clam chowder.
Where did you make it?
Just canned.
Gotcha. All right, Kamizite, maybe you can give a little bit on your dinner as well.
I mean, so I made my partner air fried Brussels sprouts with salt and pepper and freshly sliced garlic with a salmon patty and some balsamic vinegar. And I made myself Italian beef monstrosity with leftover frozen garlic bread and lemon flavored kitten souls.
What region does monstrosity come from?
It comes from the monstrosity region. So if you don't have spices from the monstrosity region, you're just eating like beef Italian Frankenstein.
Okay. And Lunasar, what did you have for dinner?
Just had I guess Panera soup that you buy at the grocery store and shove in the microwave.
All right. And was everyone's audio levels near the same, Lizzie? Also, Combine, how you doing?
Hi, Combine. Don't be on fire.
All right.
So, Splice, I have a question.
Okay, dangerous.
How are we doing a whole episode on Big Boss for Metal Gear Solid? I've never even played the game.
We're not doing a whole episode on Big Boss, just final bosses.
Stop making things up.
It's the same thing.
You know that's not.
I mean, I don't actually know that it's not. I mean, it might be the same thing. I've never played the Metal Gear Solid series, so...
While she is the final boss of that game, she's not the final boss of all games.
Kami, the universe is weird enough. You don't need to add more.
I feel like I do, though.
We are totally full up on supply. Thank you very much.
I mean, it's a part of my duties as Chief Anxiety Officer.
I don't like that you've invented this role for yourself.
Chief Anxiety?
Oh, you didn't hear this?
I've got this covered.
I am no longer the CEO of Splice Stream International Unlimited, copyright trademark restricted. I am now the Chief Anxiety Officer because as the canon has changed with the recent Infinity Splices reboot, I am Splice's Anxiety Demon. That is my role here. And so I am the Chief Anxiety Office post Splices.
I've been filling that role for years at this point. I don't know that I like you honing in on my territory.
I mean, like, it's either that or I have to go back to being the demon that, Splice it has to deal with because he made a bad decision at a 7-Eleven for 63 cents.
I've got that covered too.
Yeah, for some reason I'm now picturing, Baggins as the shoulder angel and Kamizite as the shoulder demon on Splice's shoulders.
Except they're both on the left shoulder and they're both the devil. And they're just fighting over turf.
Well, it's like that, what was it? The Emperor's New Groove,
He's
where...
got a point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Can you imagine if we combined our forces into one Splice-iety making machine? The world could be ours, or at least Provo.
I kind of doubt that.
You don't know my life. And plus, I'm a big fan of Provolone, so I think I'd do well in Provo. That's where it comes from.
There's so many things wrong with what you just said.
I'm pretty sure at least what I said was 83% true.
It also means you're pretty sure it's 17% false.
I like a little wiggle room in the facts that I dole out.
And of course, it adds up to 104. Just making sure.
I think your 87% true statement was only about 50% true.
Yeah, I never liked math. I operate on Steiner math, so that's
no one
completely...
operates on Steiner math. You just
Plenty
live it.
of people
You just live
operate
it.
on Steiner
you don't
math.
Operate on it.
Scott Steiner operates on Steiner math.
He doesn't operate on it. He lives it. There's a difference.
He also lives operating Shoney's, which are now shut down.
See, I thought you were talking about the character in FF9.
No, he's talking about the numbers don't lie and they spell disaster for you, wrestler.
Yeah, Scott Steiner, the big booty daddy, big Papa Pump. Scott Steiner. He likes chicken and Shoney's. So much so he bought 3 of them, and then they went out of business. Even the one that was the Scott Steiner Memorial Hall of Fame.
All right,
where he had all of his memorabilia.
Let's get started. So everyone goes silent, and then I shall call on you when it is time. Get ready, chat. Here we go. When a little Splice was a little lad, maybe 5 or 6 years old, I don't remember, I was playing Rescue Rangers on the NES, and I got to Fat Cat. And this isn't footage of that right now. But I struggled, and I lost, and I had to beat the game entirely again to get back to Fat Cat. And I was finally, after 5 hits of, hitting him with what I think is supposed to be maybe a cherry or a ball, I was able to defeat him. And this was the first final boss I ever defeated. And I was very excited. And I called my best friend, and he wasn't that impressed because he was another 5-year-old. And he's just like, okay, why are you calling me? Point is, final bosses feel epic, even when looking back on it, man, that was a really easy boss fight, and I just sucked because I was a kindergartner. Baggins, do you think you know the first final boss you defeated?
I think I do. I'm not entirely positive. The first one that comes to mind is Contra.
Any special thing about it?
I just remember, I mean, to be fair, when I did it, I was a kid and I used the Konami code.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I still will remind you, and you don't believe me, I know, but it is true. I have beaten the game without the Konami code.
No one did that.
But the first time I beat it, I did use the Konami code.
Well,
and I just remember, the level, because most people think of Contra, the first thing they think of is the jungle level. And then, the second and fourth levels where you're running through the 3D hallways, but the levels after level 4 start to get really weird, progressively weird. You have the snowfield, and then you go to especially the area with the crushing spiked walls. but that final level is just like, oh, this is a very different game than I first started playing, because you're in like this alien lair, and the final boss is just a giant heart, a beating heart, and
Which is
it
concerning.
makes different. It's very concerning. It also makes a different sound when you shoot it than anything else in the game, and it's just like there's a shift to it. Like, it feels like you're playing something completely different. I'm guessing the rest of y'all have beaten Contra at some point using the Konami code.
I have not actually. I didn't own the game.
Really?
My buddy owned it.
I didn't own it. I played it. I never got to the end. And when you said that the ending boss was Heart, I immediately saw Mati from Captain Planet and the Planeteers.
No. It is a giant beating heart.
I mean,
Like,
I feel like...
I think you're actually inside of a living organism at the end of the game.
Tell me that.
Oh, well, that's not terrifying at all.
What was your first boss?
I mean, my first boss was a classic. My first boss was Bowser at the end of Super Mario Brothers, OG.
Very classic.
Nobody's ever beaten that game.
I mean, some people have beaten that game, but...
And if so, it takes them hours.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's no way.
But you need to understand
now under 5 minutes.
But you need to understand also, when I was a kid and I had the Nintendo, I also was the only boy in my house. It was my mom and my 2 sisters. And so I spent a lot of time playing some video games. The same video games, because I didn't have too many of them, or whatever I could rent from the video store. But, needless to say, Super Mario 1 was the first game that I had ever beat, and I'd ever gotten to the end, and it was most satisfactory, I'd say.
All right.
Nobody else in my house got why I was so excited, but I found it very satisfactory.
It is what it is. Lunasaur, what was your first final boss that you beat?
Well, as I was thinking about this, it's hard to remember level 1 when you've overleveled as much as we have. And so I'm not 100% certain, but I do know the first one that I at least had photographic evidence taken as a child, and I actually remember was like in kindergarten or first grade, you had to make a little poster presentation of about you to kind of introduce yourself to the class. And so I actually took the picture of photographic evidence of beating a game to introduce myself to my class. And it's interesting that Baggins brings up a beating heart, because the final boss of this game also is a giant beating heart, but this one's a mechanical heart. I am talking about Crystallis.
I remember that game. That's one of the first where I remember it being an epic event.
Yeah, because like that one, I was so proud of having beaten the game that I wanted to take a picture of it. And so I made sure my mom took a picture of me standing next to the TV where you could see that I beat the game, because I felt pretty good about that moment, because that was a nice, long, epic game. It played a lot like Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo. Didn't
Nintendo Power have a section in there where you could send those pictures in?
Yeah. Well, I do know that there are like the to get the secret room that exists in Link to the Past actually was a contest where you had to send Nintendo pictures of you fighting the optional boss in the Houlihan room. Yeah. So
no, but I remember like Nintendo Power had a section where people would send in pictures of them with the final screen of various games, and
that's probably where I got the idea.
That might be. Did you actually send it in, or?
I don't think so. Like I said, I know I used it as on a poster. I mean, you had to, back in these days, you had to, actually get the photo developed, so it wasn't just printing it out.
Uh-huh.
So I know I used it for class. I'm not sure if I sent it in or not, but that's probably where I got the idea. But if it wasn't Crystallis, I don't know. There's a couple other games that could have been my first. Dragon Quest is a possibility. Back when it was Dragon Warrior, and Mega Man 2 would have been the other possible one for me. But,
Got it. But yeah, there's
But yeah.
something. There's just something about a good final boss that if you can pull it off, it ties the entire game together. It's like a nice bow.
Well, I mean, that's what that song on YouTube and The World Is Saved is all about.
Mm-hmm.
You just get that feeling of, whoa.
Yeah.
So
I've
I've been through something. I've been through something and I'm a changed person.
Yeah, and a good final boss, it should challenge you in some way that the rest of the bosses can't.
Mm-hmm.
One that always
I have something to say about that when we get into it. Finish what you're
okay.
talking
I was
about.
gonna say, like, the one I was gonna point out was the Ganondorf fight in Ocarina of Time, because
Okay.
that was an epic boss fight just to get to him. Because I'm trying to find the spot. Like, you get up to him. Let's see, where is that? Anyway, as you get
Are you
up
talking
to
about with the organ?
yeah, and the music getting louder, but playing ping pong with him in 3D. Like, obviously we've done this before, but it felt more epic in 3D.
Well, it sped up a lot. This was a lot faster and a lot longer than the Phantom Ganon fight.
Well, it's a lot harder with depth. Just because, when it's 2D, it's easy to tell. When it's 3D, it's not as easy. You got to kind of get a feel for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But like didn't you have a ping pong battle with him in the Forest Temple as well?
Well, yeah, you did have a ping pong battle with Shadow Ganon. I actually thought that one was harder because
I don't remember having
actually
a ping pong with him in the Forest Temple in at least the original. Maybe I'm
could have sworn
misremembering.
you did.
The thing
you did.
the thing I remember with the Phantom Ganon is the pictures.
Right.
Yeah, that's true. You had to shoot an arrow, but wasn't there a ping pong phase?
Yeah, you'd shoot the arrow at him when he came after you, but then there'd be a ping pong phase afterwards.
What there? Man, I don't remember that at all.
I
It's been
just
a long
remember
time.
Shadow Ganon being way harder than Ganondorf final boss.
Well, and notice I'm saying Ganondorf instead of Ganon, because Ganon actually was kind of disappointing. But it kind of felt like all one boss fight still. Like, even though there's it almost felt like an in-between phase. And just everything about it just felt so grand. And it did feel like a culmination of this grand adventure. Especially because it's like, all right, now you're actually going to use the light arrows. And the idea of a weapon that's only for the final boss is, I don't know, it's kind of cool. I don't know why. I just like items that are just for the final boss.
See, I typically don't. I was more along the lines of, why did I just use this here? This could have been cooler. I don't know. That was my personal.
I mean, it depends upon
experience.
flair, obviously. And for me, the light arrows, it's more about the flavor of it. That it's this thing that is meant to help kill the darkness himself.
Well, I mean, there's quite a few games where you have to use like an item on the final boss to reveal his true form.
Yeah. As long as it doesn't have like completely different mechanics than anything you've seen before, I tend to be good with it. If they're then suddenly like, hey, we're going to teach you an entirely new mechanic, it's like, I might have wanted this before the final boss. But I don't know. It's just, I don't know. It's something satisfying, especially, look, bosses are better when they're either at the top of the tower or at like the bottom of a basement of some kind.
The deepest dungeon.
Yeah. They either need to be like begging you to come up to meet them, or they need to be at the grand evil at the bottom that you weren't supposed to unseal or something like that.
Oh yeah, those are great.
But
So combined gaming, yeah, Photoshop flowy. Honestly, I think in recent memory, that's probably the final boss that had the like deepest impact on me emotionally because what once you reach adulthood, it's like it's a final boss. I've seen these before, but Photoshop flowy seriously creeped the heck out of me. My goodness.
is that the one where he gets the weird form?
Oh yeah. That's why he's called Photoshop. Yeah, he's in Undertale. My gosh.
But suddenly he's not pixelated like everyone else.
Yeah, because the whole game you've been pixelated, and then suddenly it's this monstrosity at the end that just was horrifying, especially because it's like fourth wall breaking horror. That
Undertale specializes in.
Yes. Goodness, yeah. So no, that's a good one. Combined gaming. That, my gosh, Photoshop flowy. I don't actually have nightmares, but it feels like I should have nightmares from that one.
All right. Well, so like, what was an example of one that left an impression on you guys?
Like a final boss.
Well, I mean, that is the topic. Yes.
Because like bosses, I've got a few impressions. Final bosses, I don't know. Like the one which I find, which is not going to be a surprise to anyone, the one that I found most ridiculous was Sephiroth. But I'm not talking about the first phase where you're in 3 teams. I'm not talking about the second phase where you're fighting, Sephiroth torso on a planet. I'm talking about the end, the one-shot punk that you get.
You win whether or not you try to lose.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I always found that an apt metaphor for the entire game is that you go through this long blow.
We're talking about ones you like.
I mean, like, I like the fact that it supports my argument that it's a bad game.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Back and say,
but I mean, like,
I'm just trying to think. There have been final bosses that stood out to me. I was thinking more along the lines of, that's another topic. I don't want to change the topic yet. I'm trying to think. What is the one that had a biggest impact to me? One that stood out, and I was just like, okay, this is actually really cool. Was Super Metroid Mother Brain?
Mm-hmm.
That I think was a brilliant transition because they take you back to something very familiar if you played the first game. Because that ending area, you're like, oh yeah, go through here. It shoots the weird little donuts at me. You got to break through the things with the missiles, and then you got to blow up the brain. I've done this before. Awesome. And you break the glass, and it looks cooler because you're shattering. You got cooler effects and everything. And you take out the brain, and it falls down. And you're like, okay, cool, I beat it. And then suddenly that suddenly that creature spawns beneath it, and the brain lifts up. And you're fighting basically a dinosaur with a mother brain head. A cybernetic dinosaur. And it's just like, oh, this is not what I signed up for at all.
No, it's one of the first instances I can think of of a game where I played where the boss fight did some really good storytelling.
Absolutely. Because you're fighting it and you're doing everything that you can. And then suddenly you just get plowed into the wall with that hyper beam, and you're just like your life just starts draining away, and you just sit there like, what do I can't do anything. What is happening? And then the baby Metroid comes in.
Mama.
And it is actually one of the most emotional, like one of the first times, not first times, but one of the strongest times when I was younger that I remember responding emotionally to a game like that. You know, because like this isn't some RPG where it's long, epic storytelling and you know, like all these characters and musical themes and stuff. This is Super Metroid, which has been silent, not silent, but like dialogue based, silent. And so the storytelling is just it's without words. The only dialogue based storytelling you really got was at the beginning of the game, the introduction. And like, you know about the baby, you know the baby exists, you know what it, you know, how Samus, like how it relates to Samus. But then, like, you know, on the lead up to the thing, when the baby first sees you and attacks you and then recognizes who you are and flies away, it's an emotional beat. And they've hit you with that just a little bit before this. And then you get to the final boss, you think you've beaten the game, you're dying, there's nothing you can do, and the baby comes back. And it's just like,
Baby, come back.
It's just like a there's some storytelling there. There's some actual emotional beats.
Well, especially with, because like you said, the lead up to the Mother Brain fight, it wouldn't at all been out of place to just have a reskin of the original fight, because it's like, hey, this is like, even just that part, it has so much more flavor to it because of the better graphics.
The game is clearly nostalgia bait, like,
Yeah.
and that's in a good way. I'm not saying that disparagingly by any means.
Yeah. Well, the thing that always confused me, because I'd never had Samus Returns on the Game Boy. The just the thought that they could continue the storyline of one game across multiple different systems was just something I hadn't seen yet. No one had really done it that I can think of anyway.
Uh-huh.
And so I had no context for what was going on with the Metroid. All I know is I was, you know, shooting a prismatic beam, and it's like, you know, taste the rainbow, Mother Brain.
We know what you really said, though.
Mother Brain.
But I will say, one that I actually did like, if you go back a Final Fantasy, was the final battle with Kefka in Final Fantasy VI. But not just because of how, you know, just because of the battle. Like, that was the first, like, experience like that. I know Final Fantasy 2, you have, or 2/4, you had, like, the whole, you know, shape-changing final form boss.
I
but,
remember Zeromus.
Oh,
right,
yeah.
you remember...
That's
exactly.
what I was thinking about with the item just to reveal the final form of the final boss, the crystal. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
But the whole thing with Kefka, where you start out at the bottom and you've got like the whole like choir music into the rock music, and then you beat one end, and
Dancing
going in
bad.
this bear, and then just going into this bear, it's like, all right, what goes on next? But like you expect it to change, but no, you just go up, and then there's the next part of the monster. And you fight it, and the music changes, and it's like, okay, this is kind of all right. I'm into this. And you beat it, and you go up, and then there's more to it, and then you go again, and then just the reveal, the come down, and then the battle itself. Like, say what you will, but you worked at all levels to get Kefka dead, and they made sure that it felt every moment as epic. There was not a bit of letdown in that entire battle. Aces all around, I would say. And, you know, because of the Final Fantasy glitch, I beat it on the first time. I spammed Ultima because it cost 1 MP. Why not? But nevertheless, I felt that was one of the more epic, one of the ones I remember just being like, wow, that was really great. I think I might have in the next day gone back and beat it again just to go through it all again. But
well, that's
a
very good sign of a good boss fight.
It's exactly. I mean, but it was so atmospheric, you know, and it was so like into just like on its own. There wasn't like an ending like that, a final boss battle like that that I had experienced up until that point. It was very involved. It was just like, okay, well, here's the rest of my afternoon. Let's go. So I don't know how everyone else. Yeah, I know a couple of other of you beat Final Fantasy 3/6 here.
Oh yeah, no, it's an incredible fight, and the music really does add a ton to it. Like Nobuo Uematsu, I'm not going to say he carried the game because the game is phenomenal in a lot of ways, but like he took that game to a whole other level.
Yeah, I mean, a good soundtrack can do wonders.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the very first game where I actually considered buying the soundtrack or even realized that you could buy a game soundtrack.
Actually, my high school buddy actually just recorded it, made his own rip recording it himself from the game.
Nice.
Look, to your point, when I went to a convention a couple of years after that, and it was my very first convention that I was allowed to go to, and when I went into the dealer's room and I saw that they had Final Fantasy on CD, like the music, I lost my mind. I dropped my entire allowance there and then some. I had to get a loan from my stepfather. But I came away with the 2/4 soundtrack, the 3/6 soundtrack, and the Final Fantasy Celtic Moon soundtrack, which was...
Oh, I love the Celtic Moon.
Yeah, it was,
I love that.
It was 4/2.
Oh, Celtic Moon. I'm sorry. I thought you said Celtic Moods. I was like, wait, that commercial from the...
No, the Celtic Moon of Final Fantasy IV.
Yeah,
that was fantastic. What we're talking about.
I had to import that thing. It's the Final Fantasy IV soundtrack that's played by like I don't know. It's done like in an Irish Celtic style. It's fantastic.
Never heard of it. I'm assuming it's awesome.
Yeah. See, now I'm thinking of that 90s album Pure Moods that had all of the like the Inya, and it was the infomercial that always came on late at night when you fall asleep watching a movie, and then that commercial came on.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were a lot that those infomercials.
They were amazing. That's an episode in and of itself.
I don't remember too many video game infomercials,
but talking about Final Fantasy end bosses.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one thing I have noticed about Final Fantasy that has led to extreme frustration in me, is there typically is a huge difficulty spike for the final boss in those games, which is why there are multiple Final Fantasy games that I have gotten to the final boss and not beaten it. Sin from FF10 is the one that really comes to mind.
To be fair,
I'm sorry.
FF10 suffers from terminal being FF10.
I'm laughing just because like FF10 was my thought of, man, they didn't make the final boss nearly hard enough. That was too easy.
I think you overleveled.
I did. I absolutely did. I got the limit break weapons, so he was a one-shot kill for me. And I'm like, that's it? Dang it. I should have fought him earlier.
Yeah, I don't think that I should be judged for you doing overkill, considering that's something you have a tendency to do.
I do have a tendency to do it. That's why, like, I actually don't mind the giant difficulty spike for the final boss, because I've been preparing for it, and it's kind of a letdown when they don't actually require that to a degree, if that makes sense.
Well, except then it requires everyone to be just as much a completionist as you.
Well, yeah, but that's why they add, like, bonus bosses.
And that's the thing. I'm okay with there being bonus bosses. I'm like, but I want to get to the end of the story, and I don't want there to be just this insane difficulty spike and them saying, "Oh, you can't do it yet." Like, if I'm going at a specific pace through the game, I shouldn't hit a wall.
Yeah, it does just kill it whenever you get to a final boss in an RPG, and it's like, nah, you need to go back and level.
I mean, like if I do need to level, I'm okay with that. But it's just like if through the rest of the game, I haven't had to go do that, or like I'm getting the levels I need by fighting and maybe doing a little bit of grinding. I'm fine having a slightly, more difficult boss that I have to grind a little bit for. But I'm talking about a boss that like, I'm doing fine and beating the bosses. And then I get to the final boss and it like one-shots me. It's just like, why am I playing this?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's hard to, I think that is a hard thing design wise to
You got to
have the final boss be, it's got to be difficult enough to actually make it feel like it was worth your time to get to that point, but you also don't want to make them so hard that people give up in frustration. Even though that was the modus operandi for NES games, but
I thought that Kefka was a good example of like a good base.
No, base is a different series all entirely.
Oh my God.
I know a good boss, but I know what you mean because they set that up. While it feels difficult, it's very hard not to win that boss fight as well. You know what I'm saying?
But the only problem I have with it for Kefka is if you are like I was the very first time I played and you had your set party.
Yep, and your A team doesn't make it to the final
Exactly.
fight.
If any one of them dies before the transition to the next phase of that, and then suddenly you're stuck with Gao.
There ain't nothing wrong with Gao.
There's nothing wrong with Gao, but I never used him, and so he was massively underleveled.
So there was something wrong with Gao, but only in that specific instance.
Well, I mean, like again, the thing with Final Fantasy VI was that it catered to so many playstyles, and every character was unique in one way or another. They had their own unique thing. You like fighting games? Sabin's your dude. You like gadgets? Edgar's your guy. You like, gothy, mustachioed fencing knights that were brooding all the time.
Gothy?
You got Silent. He was very.
You're
moody.
gonna call him gothy?
He was very moody. He was moody.
Very
he was
moody.
not gothy.
I mean, it feels like he was.
Honor. He was. I mean, dude. He was honor. He was a knight.
He was a knight, but I mean, he was Gomez Adams, also kind of, sort of.
Just because of the design, like the image maybe looks a little bit like him, but he wasn't Gomez Adams.
I mean, he tragically lost his family, but I think he was doing pretty good despite that. But
I mean, hey,
I wouldn't call him macabre in any way, shape, or form.
If you don't even like playing the game, if you just want the computer to play it for you, you had Amaru to put in your party. He'd just do whatever. You couldn't even tell him what to do. He'd just pick up one of your party members and throw him at someone. So, I mean, but there was different play styles that it catered to. It was more to my point.
Yeah,
and go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna respond to Mithril, but if you're not done with your story, go ahead.
No.
Okay, so yeah, Mithril, to my Cloud of Darkness. That's actually the one classic Final Fantasy boss I have not beaten because
that's another one.
I have not done the OG FF3 for the NES. I haven't done that one yet.
That's also got a very difficult end dungeon because there's no save point really.
Yeah, though difficult final boss, final stretch. I actually put on the screen. It made me think of this because Splice was talking about how like final boss is so satisfying if it's like either you have to climb a giant tower or go down to the pits of the earth, like deep underground to defeat an unspeakable sealed evil, and that made me think of Breath of Fire 2, Death Heaven, that was sealed by a dragon in the starting town that was sealing the cave, and that final dungeon was huge. It was so huge that I actually set the game down for like a full year because it's like I got to the halfway point in the dungeon. I'm like, I need to take a break. This final dungeon's so big, and I took a break. And then when I came back to it, like the dungeon that is so big that there's a town in the middle of the dungeon, and the people there is to help. So like there's the dragon seal on the surface, but there's a town of people that's whole job is to try and maintain the subterranean seal underneath. And then you go down all the way finally and fight the final boss, which is this demon spawn from an evil goddess that was placed in the first game as the evil goddess was defeated.
No, Tails all this time.
Yeah, Tails all the time. Evil goddess lays an evil demon spawn that turns into a giant monster, which will show up in a second here. But yeah, it was a pretty epic final boss. To actually beat it was really cool. Like, I don't know, Breath of Fire 2, bring it up a lot. It's a great game.
Well, there's also a piece of a good boss fight that we haven't really brought up too much yet. We brought up a little bit with Kefka, but it's the final boss music. I had an interesting one because I was introduced to Persona 5 music long before I ever played it. And so I knew Last Surprise and Rivers in the Desert. And so every time Last Surprise, you're going into these dungeons after you've left the calling card. Pretty cool. But when you finally get to the final boss fight and it starts playing Rivers in the Desert, it just feels so much cooler. Oh
yeah.
Anyone got any particular favorite final boss themes?
Well, I'm trying to think in Persona 5, that's not actually, that's not the actual, like, final boss, right? But
yeah, it is.
Well, like, you hear Rivers in the Desert before the final boss.
I don't believe so.
Palace.
I believe it's once you get.
Well, that's right. You played. Okay, the final boss is different because I played the OG. That's right. You played Royal.
Yeah, so they don't bust out Last Surprise till you fight Yelda Baelth. Or
you mean
Rivers in the Desert? Yeah, sorry.
Ah, okay. Because yeah, in the original one, when you were fighting the shadow of the politician dude. That's the first time it played Rivers in the Desert.
Ah, okay.
But yeah, oh gosh, such a great song though. It just gets you so pumped.
Well, and when you save a song for only a boss fight, there's something about it because it just tells you this fight is special. We got music just for it and it alone, nothing else.
And those often are like, when you think about it, not everyone's even going to hear the song, and yet they usually save one of the best songs for exactly that moment too. But
why it feels special.
I think that's reward. I think it's important though. I think you need to be rewarded with that best music because honestly, that's what makes you remember the game for those who do beat it. Like,
do you know?
Think of every BioWare game you've ever played. You forget the final boss because they didn't do anything special with it. Like, they're terrible at planning for the end and planning for that end battle to make sure the player feels satisfied at the end of that moment is so important to the longevity and love of the game over time. And yeah, saving that awesome song for the end does exactly that.
And that's kind of a holdover from cinema as well. You typically have an epic song at the end of the movie and then even an epic credits song. And it's just something like there is a satisfaction that comes with beating something, but there's a little bit of manipulation with the music to kind of encourage that feeling. Because it's like this is how we want people to feel after they've finished our game or our movie. And so they'll have a piece of music that makes it feel special to have gotten to the end.
The one that I want to bring up that just has an amazing boss fight is Hades from Hades.
Yes.
Just because.
Oh, that fight is.
Well, it's because
that's a rough fight.
It's so good because you beat him and you're just like, yes, I finally beat him. And then the thing that's fun about him is he's the main character's father. And so he then does Death Defiance just like you do. And he comes back. And it's like, what? No, that's my trick. And he's
Where did you get it from, boy?
Yeah, and then and that's when the electric guitar just kicks in with a hard bass. You're just like, there's a whole new phase.
I swear, I should expect it when I'm playing a roguelike now. They always do that.
Well,
All
yeah.
of them. FTL, Rogue Legacy, Hades. They always make you feel like, yes, I did it, and then punk you, which is why I still haven't beaten FTL, because I was so pissed off when they did that to me.
To be fair, that's been a trope in games long before roguelikes.
Yeah.
were a big thing. It's just, I mean, it's just such a trope of you beat the boss, but this isn't my final form. That's been happening for ages.
Oh, yeah. I mean, RPGs do it too, but it's just not... I don't know. It wasn't as... never was as big of an issue in an RPG as it was a roguelite. But I think that's just because... I think the difference is in the case of a roguelite, you have to go all the way back to the beginning. So being defeated by the final boss is a bit of a humiliation that's not the case in other games.
Roguelikes are also designed to have you just keep throwing yourself at a wall until you finally get through it.
And what I like about the Hades fight in particular is that the first time you beat him, you've probably gotten some sort of like you've got the nuts build, but you are also you're figuring out the pattern of the boss fight. And so it's a little bit of column A. And Hades is good because they do such a good job of narratively rewarding you for getting back to Hades, because that's how you actually progress the plot of the game. And so you have to keep getting to him. And because they do a good job of incentivizing you to use different weapons, pick different God's boons and stuff like that, it's always found it very satisfying to keep going back.
Mm-hmm.
And now there's madmen who have beaten the game on full torment, which doesn't even make any sense. Full heat, I should say. But they figured it out.
Well, I had to just go check this because I needed to confirm in my head that this was a final boss theme, and it wasn't. But quick shout out, honorable mention to Mega Man 2. While the final boss theme was not what I thought it was, still the entire soundtrack, and especially that last Dr. Wily's lair entire bit, I feel like that should at least get mentioned here in the whole final package of a game.
Well, yeah, actually, Mega Man 2 is really interesting because, like, Dr. Wily had, his stages had, like, super banger music, and then that final stage, it was deathly silent. Like, it was so eerie as you walk up to that final boss.
Yeah, it was.
And because it was an alien.
Yeah. Well, and that was a shocker, because, I mean, yeah, this is one of my first games, too. And I will admit, though, actually defeating him felt a little like, whoa, he was really an alien all along, and then it's like,
nope,
nah,
he was
actually, we
you.
were just punking you. It's like, oh, okay. That's okay. But yeah, as you're walking this final hallway, it's just...
where the ceiling is
silent.
bleeding.
And all you hear is the acid from the ceiling hitting the floor, making a little drop sound, and that's it. But there's also nowhere to heal or anything, so if one of those hits you, you're just taking damage.
Yep. But I mean, but again, like Mega Man, you like with almost all of the Final Fantasies, the early on ones, like that was a banger soundtrack. There was not a bad track on there, and that's also in the 8-bit days when they were still trying to figure everything out. So I feel like, especially if you can remember ones from like the Nintendo days, they must have done something really right there, because I mean, all they had was 8 bits. It's all chip tunes.
Yeah, it's quite incredible. the Mega Man 2, just the entire build up. I mean, look, it also has one of the most amazing intros of all time,
Oh,
Oh yeah.
which it's one of those things. It was a passion project because the sales of the original didn't make Capcom confident in any sort of sequel, and they're like, you can do it on your own time. And
Well, we could take it or leave it, but we're really
yeah, and you look at the sales figures. It's like I understand why they didn't have confidence in it, but
Oh yeah.
they just knocked it out of the park. Hey, Mithril.
Hey,
Hello,
Mithril.
hello.
Hey,
Mithril,
Mithril.
what was your first boss fight you beat? Final boss fight.
First final boss that I beat. Um, it's hard to really tell for sure which one it is, and I'm debating whether to tell the embarrassing story of what my first GameCube game was.
Always.
I guess I have to. So I would have been like 5 years old. GameCube didn't come directly with a pack-in, I want to say.
Goodness, this ending. Oh.
I don't remember. But my grandparents for Christmas got us a GameCube, and the game that we had on the GameCube was Star Fox Adventure.
Yay, Dinosaur Planet.
Honestly,
Very
having
disappointed
never-
final boss.
I'm just like, having never played a Star Fox game before that, I had no concept of what I was getting into. I enjoyed the game for the most part. I was really thrown off when the final boss was completely different from everything else in the game. I'm like,
Yeah, we're
who's
suddenly it's a
Andros?
space
Who's
fight.
Falco? Why do I
Yeah.
care about these people? This was before I even played Melee, you know? I didn't know anything about Star Fox.
Uh-huh.
And so it's just like, cool, I beat it.
And it's one of the
That was
reasons
weird.
Star Fox Adventures is just this very odd game that was not confident in its own decisions.
Oh yeah, no. It's a game that would not necessarily be made today by Nintendo, but would, I don't know.
Made back
Now-
then by
so
Nintendo.
many-
It was made by Rare.
Yeah, I have so many mixed feelings about that game where it's like, because like I said, I played it and didn't have any expectations of what a Star Fox was. I'm
Wow,
not gonna
yeah.
go out of my way
Man.
and say it's a good game, but I'm also
Now-
not gonna say that it's like as terrible as people hating on it said it was, just because it wasn't Star Fox.
Well, like I
Now-
mean,
now,
that's an interesting thing to be your very first Star Fox.
Yeah,
because
it really is. Now,
like that's nothing.
I
like
am an enigma, apparently.
Now,
So-
speaking of Star Fox, though, Star Fox 64 did have an awesome end boss, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, and again, it was a phase change. You know, you have the boss that you're fighting, and then suddenly it's like, this isn't my final form, and
I just realized it's the exact same ending as Metroid. You fight a brain, and then you have to
Yep.
escape an exploding planet.
yeah. It's
It was-
interesting.
it
We've
was
had
big.
Classic.
multiple games where you either fight like a beating heart or a brain. That's kind of interesting.
Mhm.
The organs keep being
man.
the final boss.
I will
was
just
gonna
say,
we have the whole debate around Earthbound's final boss too in that regard.
no, I disagree with that fan theory. It disturbs me, and no, just no. But while the Mega Man 2 ending's still playing, gosh, I love this ending. The thing is that ending sequence was really short, but it also was probably one of the more emotional, impactful NES endings of all time. And they put so much emotion just in that little bit of him walking in the music. Ah, love it. Good job, Capcom USA.
oh wow, I just had a thought that just reminded me of an end boss that was a huge one, but I haven't thought of it in a while. We've talked about the game though. Is Bionic Commando? That final boss was a beast.
Was it?
It's like this giant ship thing that has, like, you have to dodge around these fire things and get up to a really high spot on it that you can, and then start unloading your weapon on this, the weak point, essentially. Like, that's all I can describe it as. It's this weird little bubbly thing that you have to shoot over and over and over and over again. But if you don't drop down, then there's this jet that shoots out a flame. So you can only get up there, and then you unload as fast as you can, and then you have to drop down before you get damaged so that you can go up and do it again. And it was just this interesting little dance that you had to do using Bionic Commando's atypical controls.
Is this it? Am I on the right thing?
Probably.
I mean, because there's Hitler.
It is Bionic Commando NES.
Yeah. Yeah, this is
that's it.
Man, that is weird.
Yeah, so you have to get up to that pulsating little orb thing. But see, there's the spot at the very, very top of it that you have to grapple onto. Meanwhile, these jets are trying to
Flashing
take
effect warning.
And so so you got to get up, and then you just unload, and it's just a very interesting fight. Like I feel it's very well designed based on the controls of the game, because the controls for that game are very different.
Fair.
But and that's sort of a cool thing about that that era of games is you can just do things that no one else can do. Because literally no one else has done it.
Now, I'm curious, if you miss that final shot with the rocket launcher, is it game over?
No, it's a death. See that little gun thing at the end? It just starts unloading on you.
Mm.
And there's no way to get up to fight him. So yeah, so it basically takes you back to that.
I'm sorry, wait. Did that say this base will explode?
Probably.
Explode, yeah. Oh, there! Don't even start there. That's not the like.
Yep, explode.
Explode.
Yeah, the end of that, like the translation for that game has a lot to be desired. But again, it's one of those things where after a while, it's not a bug; it's a feature.
I'm gonna say is Explode making it into the mission name table.
I kind of want it to, but probably not. Anyway, so killed Hitler. That's pretty cool.
I mean, if you're into that kind of thing.
Yeah. Anyway, so one I want to talk about, it's a very different type of final boss, but this is special because this literally is the kill. This is my old guild, for instance, fighting the Lich King, the final boss of an MMO.
So is this actually you playing?
ICC 10 man? Ooh.
Yep, ICC 10 man. I'm somewhere in the stack of people. I'm probably the Tauren at the back.
Is this when
Jack.
you were spliced beef?
Yes, this is Spliced Beef, my shaman. And we beat our head up against the Lich King for weeks and just couldn't beat him. He is one of the most complicated boss fights they've done. And everything still feels fair as far as the mechanics go. It's just very difficult to get 10 people. I have no clue how the 25-man people do it. To execute a plan perfectly. And this was a big deal because the pre-patch for Cataclysm was coming out in 2 days, and this was our last raid night before pre-patch. And once pre-patch came, you would get all this easy gear and you don't get the achievement, basically.
Yeah.
And so this was our last chance, and this was going to be our final pull. And so you could tell everyone was sitting up straight, turned their hats backwards, got super serious with it. And it's one thing to have a final boss fight. It's one thing to lead up to it with literally over a year's worth of content. And, it's all been leading up to this moment. And you've been working together as a team to get it done. And as a team, you get it done. Nothing beats that feeling. I don't know what it is about teamwork that makes the dream work, but it does.
Yeah.
Sound like my boss at work before everything crashes.
Team. I love the word team.
But it's weird because it really is because of the communal nature of it. I don't know why this boss kill, the fact that the recording still exists. I went looking for it, and I'm like, I wonder, because I remember someone was recording, and I found it under our old guild name, for instance, still one of my favorite guild names ever. But like this right here, where suddenly no one can stand in the middle, and we have to still clean up a few mobs because at the same time they have other mobs. You see the line coming in that if it reaches you before it's dead, it knocks everyone off the ledge, and there's no battle resing people who have plummeted to their death.
I'm sorry, I can't help but laugh at the black lightning effect.
Oh, you think the black lightning effect's a little cheap?
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
But does this count as a final boss though? This is MMO, right? Or
Yeah,
this is
no. MMOs definitely have final bosses.
Yeah, they tend to be final boss of the expansion.
yeah, I'll give it to you.
No,
Yeah. It is.
I am
It's-
100% on board with
Yeah, it's final. When it is current, it is considered final, and yes, you can make the argument of, well, it's not final because they're always going to just have more stuff after that. But
each
it is
expansion
like-
can have its own final boss.
Each expansion's basically
Yeah,
a game.
to-
I mean, they develop it as if it's its own game. It's just built on top of an existing infrastructure.
yeah,
Because
Okay.
Now,
All right.
For FF14, it's a little different because, like, the final boss, when you get to it, you're playing through what's essentially story mode, and then they have like the raid bosses and stuff after that, and that's a kind of more, in my opinion, an epic win because, like, when you beat the boss the first time, it's rough, especially if you're beating it early on before everybody's kind of got the fight solved. But I know that with raids, that's when you're playing through progression and you're trying to get stronger and better and faster and more coordinated. So that's not something I have a lot of experience in. But I was curious if there's anything like that you've got, Mithril, since I know that you are a regular raider.
I mean, that's literally
Kind
where he
of.
was.
Yeah, exactly. One sec. Let me see if
Now,
if Romano has footage of
it's hard
one of
to
these
talk
on his
about
channel.
FF14. It's hard to talk about FF14 end bosses just because as a community, we're like, we don't want to spoil. We don't want to spoil. We don't want to spoil.
Yeah, I was gonna say one of the like 12, 8-man raids
And that's
because
kind of
those
why I
are
was
not
talking about the raids.
necessarily
It's different. Yeah.
direct to
No, from what I understand, in FF14, like coming late to the party doesn't mean you miss out on any of the story, right?
Which is why we don't
Yes.
want to spoil.
that's
that
actually
is-
really nice. That is nice.
It's a very interesting trade-off to make because in some ways it's really good because it means you can experience the same story everyone
I
else did.
add
The
this to
downside
the-
is if someone starts playing because they want to play with their friends, well, it's going to be a bit before you can do content with them, and
How do
so
I add something
it's
to
a
the thing
trade-off.
again?
There's a field at the top that you add the link to the video.
Yes, here.
Dang it.
Yeah, so this was the I may have added it. Oh wait, add to playlist.
There you go.
So this was the final of Shadowbringers. The final, same sort of thing. Final pull of the
Hey.
night. 90K being a hard game crash. But it is.
I didn't I was watching him when he did this. I didn't realize this was the final boss fight.
Oh yeah, no. This was the final boss of the raid series. So the way that
Yeah.
Final Fantasy does is you have the story mode. It goes through, and then the story goes through usually quests, dungeons, and trials.
Mm-hmm.
And then the raids are a set higher difficulty that's like a side story that branches off. It's not required for the main story, but kind of its own self-contained thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have the savage modes, which are basically after you beat the normal raids, you go to the Wandering Minstrel, who's literally it's a character that's made to look like Yoshi P, but in-game, in the character editor. It's kind of funny. And he then, like, so the lore around why these bosses are so much harder is, like, here's the embellished story of your boss fight that is being told by the minstrel.
Yes, I love that that build. I like how they do that.
So it's a little bit of flavor. So it's not like, hey, you're retconning the fight that happened. This is, for all intents and purposes, not real, quote unquote. But yeah, this is like the final phase of the final raid boss in Shadowbringers, and this was like a couple weeks before Endwalker came out. Is when we finally
this-
downed it.
This is Eden.
Yeah, this was Eden, because what they did is that each boss, not each boss, but at this time, this was one of the bosses that had like a door boss phase. So you have phase 1, which is the phase you get in normal, and then you go into Savage, and after you beat phase 1, which is different in Savage anyway, you get a Savage exclusive phase 2. So what you see here is like relativity mechanics were her thing, where it's like, hey, here's a stack of several different debuffs that are all going, like, they're all on timers that are going to do various effects on you, and then you just have to solve the mechanic, figure out what your debuffs do, and just work in tandem to solve it. And if anyone's in the wrong position, you're probably going to wipe the raid. And that sort of thing happens several times throughout, so it's with, you know, different effects and whatnot. So all the big like stoplight things and whatnot, we're shooting lasers. And then coming up, there's one that's like, she just leaves the arena, and then you'll just see everyone teleporting around like crazy, where you're basically baiting things that you, like, teleport points, and then you go to somewhere else, and then you go back to the points you bait. It's all based on timers and triggers and all that type of stuff, and it's really complicated, but they managed to make it so, and I agree with you, Splice, in terms of there is something special about working together to get that fully solved.
Especially in any of these style of raids where there's a lot of personal responsibility, and one person's mistake can wipe the entire party. And so it's sort of this and everyone who's played an MMO and raided at some point has been responsible for wiping the raid. And it's just part of the experience. It's not a bug, it's a feature, and I like it.
This is why it's important to find a good raid group, because
you either need to find a raid group that's super casual and they don't take it too seriously, or you need to find one that's super serious and everyone's trying their best.
Yeah, you need to find a group that matches your play style, because if you want to be a tryhard and you're around a group of people that are all casuals, even if you're all friends, you're probably going to be the one standing out having a bad time. And if it's the other way around, then everyone else is going to be having a bad time because you're trying to be casual and they're all trying to be super serious.
Yep.
Yeah, that's part of the thing that kind of makes the concept of a MMO hard for me, because if you're casually a try hard and you try hard to be casual, it doesn't work out too well.
No, not exactly. And it's why I have, this raid group in FF14, but I don't really do any other group stuff in any of the other games that I play, just because I'm so much of like a loner solo player of just like, I do things my way, and I have a little bit of like anxiety around what's going to happen. Like, oh, I'm messing up, so I'm messing up other people's days. So
see, and that's one of the things that I like about FF14 is, especially in the most recent stuff, you can play solo if you want, but the group stuff is there if you want it as well.
Yeah. I'm fine with like the casual group stuff, but it's like higher end raiding or whatnot, or like playing an old school RuneScape, I will try to do pretty much everything solo because I don't know anyone personally who's playing in the high levels, and I feel really weird joining a group to do something that's really high level that I'm not fully confident in.
Well, and that's the whole thing that's fun about it, is trying to figure out, the first time you do it, just trying to figure out where you actually fit in. Yeah. So, other than MMO boss fights, were there any other like boss fight like themes that stood out to you?
When you say themes,
Music.
are you talking music? Okay. I will say, again, I apparently have to drop at least one because it is what it is, not even because of channel or anything. There are certain bosses in Fire Emblem games that they usually have a unique musical theme for certain bosses and final bosses in particular. And one of them that is just, it hits right, because they timed out the music real well and everything, is the fire dragon at the end of Fire Emblem 7, just Fire Emblem GBA, for people who got it when it was first released.
That's the one with Lynn, right?
Yeah, Lynn, Eliwood, Hector. And so you get into this fight, the dragon, because the way that the fights go is you're on the map, and then you select fight, and then the animation plays. And they made it so you can't skip the animations for the fire dragon. You have to, you can't just reduce it to map animations. You have to do it in, the cinematic little 2D sprite work.
They're forcing it to be a cinematic experience.
Exactly. The dragon descends, the MIDI, GBA MIDI organ goes, and it's like a little bit like of almost like a Final Fantasy style intro, whatever, but just it hits just kind of right, perfect with the timing on that. And I don't know if I have a video clip with the music that times it out right, that doesn't have someone else's commentary over it.
We can't really hear the music anyway, so
yeah, exactly. But look it up sometime. It's a small bit of music because it only plays 30 seconds to a minute at a time. But
now, okay, tactics games, final boss fights are always really difficult for tactics games, I've felt.
They are so weird.
Yeah, they are weird. Especially Disgaea's. Yeah.
Because I feel like they either are they're either cakewalks or they're curb stomps, and it's very difficult to have in betweens.
Well, the thing is with a lot of tactical games is, for the most part, you're fighting enemies that are on parity with your characters. Like it's, another class that you could potentially have your own party, but you're using superior tactics to make sure that you're dealing more damage than taking, and that's how you win.
Yeah.
But to have one super enemy where it's well, the way the whole grid works, it's I can't have everyone attack it, but also it can only attack once per round. So it's either they have to give it extra turns in one round, or it's kind of weird to balance a super enemy. So
yeah, because it's not, you can't really, unless it's something super intuitive, you can't really throw a new mechanic at the person, because that, especially if it's a hardcore tactics game like an XCOM, where death means you don't have the character anymore.
Yeah. Oh, that reminds me of final bosses kind of blend together with final levels in tactics games, because oftentimes it's the whole situation is the epic climax, not necessarily
well,
the creature at the end.
Each fight in these games is it's by the way the game is designed, it's every single one of them is essentially one-on-one. You have a clash one-on-one, and then the next is a clash one-on-one, while in most RPGs you have a group going up against the big boss. And because of that, like you were saying, it ends up kind of devolving into either a curb stomp or a cakewalk.
Yeah. Well, and most of them, from my experience as I remember it, they mostly just become a mob rush where they're just sending way more enemies at you than you normally would.
Right.
Face, and maybe one or two special ones. That's what it tends to be in XCOM, for example, because
Question on that when you're finished.
Well, yeah,
your
and
thought.
also they tend to give like the final boss the power to kind of teleport around the map too,
Yeah,
to kind of make it present in more places.
To prolong the fight too.
Yeah,
yeah, so that you can't just set up a perfect kill shot type of thing.
because
Or
I think
give it
both
multiple
XCOM.
phases where you can't just one shot it. Because the
I wanna-
first XCOM, there's just 3 ethereals you have to kill in the same room, which that's a lot, but you figure
Sniper
out like,
hallway.
yeah, you figure out how to see it from across a hallway, and you just let the snipers take them out. To it,
Yeah.
I know the game designers are like,
was-
that wasn't what it was supposed to be, but I forgot we have our players.
Yeah, I was gonna say
I think
XCOM.
if Final Fantasy Tactics also had that teleport boss. I can't remember how Alma fights.
Yeah, a number of
Yeah.
Fire Emblem games have had it where it's the final boss is like, okay, in order to be interesting, we have it summon a lot of other things to kind of keep you busy and give your other units something to do. I was gonna ask Splice, have you ever done like achievement runs in XCOM 2?
I haven't done full achievement runs beyond beat the game in Legendary, because I did achievement runs with the original, and it's just so tedious.
Because I will say, XCOM 2, the final mission, is hard with the way that they time it out. But if you do either the complete it with a 4-man squad, or especially complete it with with conventional weaponry,
The conventional
That
weaponry
becomes-
achievement is just so tedious.
it's just the final level that you have to do conventional weaponry on. It's
Even
not the rest of the
still,
mission. But even still, I will say that is the hardest thing I have ever done in any of the XCOM games, bar none.
Yeah, I haven't
Because
bothered
it is
trying.
so stupid. I had to like save scum reload so freaking much to get like perfect turns every single turn. I think I had to basically rely on repeaters sometimes.
Yeah, I'm like,
it
you have to.
it's not pleasant, it's not fun, but hot dang if it isn't a truly epic experience in its own right when you finally finish it. It truly feels like you have completed XCOM to do that achievement.
Well, and you're just completely styling on the aliens, where you're just like, that's right, I took you out with regular bullets. What you gonna do?
Yeah, sure, you have 40 health and I'm using a gun that deals 4 damage. What you gonna do?
No, I haven't bothered with that. I've seen that, and I just say to
Fair.
myself, I love myself more than that.
I can't blame anyone for not wanting to do that run,
It is so brutal.
but
But no,
I
but-
luckily got that done and got 100% before they shut down the multiplayer servers.
Yeah, but tactics. That is the issue. Is late game in a tactics. It's all about the action economy and cheesing out multiple actions in a way you could not do in the early game. And so what they have to do something to basically put speed bumps in front of you to make sure you don't just get to just do things and the enemy never gets to respond whatsoever. And so like in XCOM 2, it's all right, we're going to send one wave at you, and like the final goal is to kill all 3 of the avatars. But we're not going to send all 3 avatars at the same time. So,
Do you have to kill the avatars to restore your honor?
yes.
Yes.
And so it's
Um,
just one of those things where it's like, okay, so this is how we're going to make it difficult on you. We're going to send a bunch of mobs at you, and you can't just kill all the avatars all at once, because we're not going to let you see the avatars all at once. You have to deal with these mobs. You don't get to cheese it until the final avatar shows up, and then it's just throw everything at this son of a gun and do not worry about anyone else. Be done.
I was going to say, oh, sorry. You
I was
finish.
just gonna say, because at that point there's probably like 15 guys on the stage, and it's not going to be easy.
Yeah. Speaking of action economy, that also comes up even in like turn-based JRPGs where it's like, you have a team of, let's say 4 heroes, versus one enemy. How do you make that enemy threatening? Final Fantasy III decided that to make their bosses threatening, they would give them more actions per round. I don't know how that could possibly backfire. It's not like, they have damage numbers that are scaled so that way they can barely not kill you in one shot from max. But then if they randomly decide to attack the same person, they just kill them. And it's also not like Final Fantasy III didn't have a real initiative, like speed-based initiative system. So Cerberus can take 3 actions at the end of one turn and then immediately take 3 more actions at the start of the next turn. It's not like that's ever happened before and wiped your game and you have no ability to say anything about it.
Yeah, it's what I liked about the Persona 5 final boss of Yaldabaoth, where he had these like nodes around him that all do specific attacks, and so it's all about finding a way to take out those nodes before they get to attack, so that you can then focus all your damage on the main boss.
Yeah, that's kind of how what Octopath Traveler is built around, because your characters there's different ways that you can attack, with different elements or different weapons, and the enemy has like a shield up that if you attack with the right combination of elements and weapons, then you can actually stun them for a couple of turns. And so it's almost like it's got a little bit of a puzzle aspect to it, because
I love when they throw in a little bit of a puzzle into an RPG.
Yeah, you might actually enjoy Octopath Traveler. I'm not sure.
Octopath is a very, very well done battle system in the traditional turn-based style.
Agreed.
Well, I feel like they were greatly inspired by Bravely Default.
Oh yeah, isn't it like the same team?
Probably.
That did, because
I think it is.
they effectively have the Brave Default system in Octopath with you can take up to 4 actions in advance, and then you have to pay those turns back later.
Yep.
I have played mostly through. No, I don't want to say mostly through. I'm maybe a fourth of the way through Octopath Traveler, and I want to go back and I want to play it again, but I've just got too many other games.
I got sucked into the demo, but then when I got the final game when it came out, I haven't actually popped it in.
Yeah, I'm running into the same issue with Sea of Stars, and it's just finding the time to play all of the games I want to play.
Sea of Stars is worth not just but 100%.
I know. I know. I will get back into that soon. But I'm actually, I know we were talking about soundtracks for a second there, but I'm actually kind of surprised that I haven't heard anyone else give a certain bad guy that
I hope it's not the one I have queued up that I'm waiting on to a chance to talk about.
I don't know. Is it a beloved RPG from the Super Nintendo era?
Beloved RPG from the Super Nintendo era. I've just been waiting for them to finish their conversation.
Oh, well, then I will not steal your thunder if we're talking about the same one, and I will let you go first. I was just like, I'm surprised nobody said this yet.
I'm sorry. There's a lot of classic RPGs on the Super Nintendo. Are we sure you guys?
Yeah, but there's only one. There's only one
just
classic RPG of the Super Nintendo era that I think we can be talking about.
I think I know what you're talking about.
And I will let Lunasar do the honors.
Is the screen confirming your suspicion?
Exactly. Yeah. 100%.
Thank you. Yeah. I as soon as I saw where you were going, I'm like, I'm gonna jump in because I've been waiting. I've been waiting.
100%. I wasn't trying to steal anyone's thunder. I was just like, wow, we're getting towards the end of the podcast, and this hasn't come up yet.
Well, Mithril came in, and so he was getting his chance.
A lot of good final bosses.
Yeah, but final bosses, man. This game, I feel like, had one of the best final boss experiences in any game. And the fact that this game is designed for you to tackle this final boss many, many times as you do New Game Pluses and make every experience unique, fun, and entertaining. It's hard to beat Lavos. I mean...
Well, not to mention just that sound effect when he shows up, that It's just it's horrifying.
But yeah, just a multi-dimensional space and time devouring monster coming to eat your planet. Like, you want to talk about like sealed monstrosities that you have to take. I mean, goodness, this one kind of gave that whole question of like, is Magus a bad guy, and the whole like thought of, well, if I failed, everyone was dead anyway. Magus's thought pattern on that. But Lavos, where you have, oh goodness, there's more than one way to tackle this boss too. So the video I pulled up is the one where you don't crash your time machine spaceship. Well, not spaceship, flying ship into it, where you have to do a boss rush of all the bosses you've had throughout the game. And I also love how like you could tackle this boss. Like, this is not a boss that requires you to like reach the end or like some big dungeon. Like, like a third the way through the game, it's like, oh, by the way, the final boss is through this portal, and it's like, but
go fight him now if you dare.
I'm trying to remember the way he put it is a shortcut off of the mortal coil. Something about like, you can fight him now, but that's a bad idea.
I mean, you can fight him now, but you could also fight a bear right now, and it'd probably be about the same thing. Like,
But like the music, the mood, everything, the way it's integrated into the story. I mean, Lavos is one of the quintessential perfect final bosses.
The multiple phases.
Yeah, the multiple phases, and the
a little bit of a puzzle
fighting him, the external, and then going inside and going to the core. Speaking of, how you have to fight organs and giant creatures, this has that too.
Weird
this
that it
has a
keeps
little
coming
bit of
up.
everything. Though,
but I mean,
it doesn't look like an organ though, but it's just the core inside it.
But I think it's fair to say at this point is that I feel like there's been a common theme among all of these, and like the moment I started going in this direction, you knew where I was going. That was the only direction I could be going with that one. And then Baggins picked up on it really quick. And it was the same thing with, kind of when we were talking about some of the Final Fantasies earlier with that as well. What makes the best boss is the experience. Like, the boss itself can be difficult and there can be satisfying, but it's like the really good ones, the best ones, great music, great mechanics, just difficult enough that you have to work for it, but not so difficult that you're having to like learn like complex behavioral patterns and having to get an associate's in psychology so that you can understand truly what the meaning of being a monster is. So
is what you're saying that at the end of it all, gamers play what we play, not for game over, but rather for what we take away?
Yes and no. Yeah, for the most part. I mean, like,
sorry, that's a.
Were you
song.
quoting?
That's a song lyric.
Yeah,
he's quoting "The world is saved" again.
yeah. I'm pretty sure he's quoting "The world is saved." But I don't know. I also one thing I really appreciate, like in the case of like Final Fantasy IV, Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy VI, is also by the time you get to the final boss, I feel like there needs to be moral clarity. Like, it's okay when you have villains that have, morally ambiguous stuff like, Magus, right? Magus, whatever you want to call him. He's one of the ends justify the means. It's like, oh, he's been the villain the whole time. He's been the main antagonist. And then you find out, no, the true evil is Lavos, and he's actually trying to take down Lavos in his own way. And when he fails, he's like, I'm done. And also in like Final Fantasy IV, Golbez was the big enemy, but at the end, no, the final boss is Zeramis, right?
Now, a lot of people will argue that point because it's just like, wait, this has been the final boss, and you just sort of drop a new big bad on me.
I know a lot of people don't like that, but I think it's nice to have moral clarity and to have a redemptive arc of if there's moral ambiguity,
Yeah, I'm somewhere in between. I can see where it is, but at the same time, it's just like, I'm sorry, where were you this whole time? Oh, I was over here by the
Well,
by the water
the thing
fountain.
is,
I was like,
well, I will say the one game that I feel like they kind of failed at doing this well, because it all depends on execution. Like everything,
right.
every story beat, it depends on execution, no matter how great your idea is, right? And I know some
Right.
people didn't like the execution in Final Fantasy IV. I liked it. I don't know anyone that complains about the execution in Chrono Trigger. Everyone.
No, I
No,
agree.
I
Everyone
mean,
looked-
Lavos is also there, not necessarily from the very beginning, but like
Pretty
quite
early on.
Yeah, pretty early on. So
Well, he's
yeah,
he's the overarching threat that everything centers around.
yeah. So even when like Magus is the main villain, you still know about Lavos's existence, and I think that
Well, I
does
mean,
help.
When
I
Magus
never even
was the
thought
main
Magus was the
villain-
main villain because he's only the main villain of
Yeah.
like 600 BC or whatever.
AD, yeah.
AD, yeah.
Yeah, and the thing is, Lavos at that point you believe that Lavos is his creation.
Well, that's right. And you've also been to the future. You've seen the future, so yeah, that's true.
Like you think Magus is the main bad guy for a while just because you think he created Lavos.
Yes.
But at the
that's
end,
why.
but honestly, the ultimate threat has always been Lavos.
Yeah, you're right. The ultimate
Well-
threat has always been Lavos.
And the thing
But-
that's interesting about Lavos is, even though he's a creature, it's very, very much like Godzilla, where it's treated much more like this inevitable natural disaster, more so.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think that does contribute to its moral clarity. But the one that I think really failed in this regard would be Final Fantasy IX. It's like you fight Kuja, and then there's that final boss that's like, you think Zeramis was out of left field. The final boss of 9 was like, I don't even remember what its name was. It was so weird.
just the walk-on guest boss to take over at the end. It's like, oh, hey guys,
I
it's
remember
Michael Richards as the
I
final
remember
boss.
very little about 9.
I never played
Yeah.
none.
But like, I thought Final Fantasy IV's was well done enough because it kind of, I feel like there was enough build up that you're like, okay, so basically there is an actual devil in this game, and that's the the one that's really the problem. Whereas yeah, you're right, in Chrono Trigger you did kind of know about Lavos as being the calamity, the coming calamity.
I was gonna
Pretty
say,
soon
Final
from
Fantasy's
the
been
thing.
doing that thing since 2 as well, with, oh, you defeated the Emperor, we'll now go into literal hell and fight the Emperor of... He has become the Emperor of literal hell.
Oh yeah, I kind of forgot about that, even though I did beat that one.
I mean, I think also one thing that's really interesting to note is that most of the things that we've referenced here do have that moral, just kind of line to where you can see the good from the bad, and sometimes it seems like they crowbar somebody to one side of that line at the very end. And almost everything that we've mentioned here so far tonight has been, back in our heyday, the things that we enjoyed as a child, with the possible exception of 1 or 2. But I mean, like, I will say straight up, Baldur's Gate 3, I think, is one of the better modern characters, with the I'm not spoiling it for anyone, but the Elder Brain as the end boss, multiple ways to beat it, pretty good soundtrack, and really it can go any way you want with that one. You can go the path of evil, you can go the path of good, you can make the sacrifice play. There's like something like 9 endings, and they're about to patch again next week and put a 10th ending in there as well. So, I mean, I think that there's
Frickin'
something to be
Larian.
said. Yeah, I mean, like, give them this much, they will give you your money's worth. It's one of the few games I would say is worth $70. But, like, in all the games that we talked about, what Lunastar was just talking about, with, there's a clear good guys and bad guys in all of these games most of these games that we've referenced.
I feel like that's like important to be able to understand and discern good from evil. And if you can't do that, you're kind of a confused individual. And I kind of think that takes away satisfaction in a story if you can't do that.
Totally fair.
I think
And-
it depends on the type of story you're trying to tell. Like, I would not say... We brought up Hades earlier. I would not say Hades is evil in that
Correct.
game, in that depiction. I think it's more about just the overarching conflict. And I think that that can be the case. I don't think it necessarily has to be the case, definitely. I think that people who try to make it into, everyone
Yeah.
has to have shades
Well,
of gray, that's in its own set of problems.
But it leans to what is the concept of the game itself. In most RPGs, the concept of what's happening here is a final fight. Whereas in Hades, due to the roguelike elements, they've set up both the fight and the story to where it's not a final fight. It's just a temporarily final fight. And, there isn't a moral clarity because beating the boss is only part of figuring out your father's moral center and what it is that, and why it is
what he's trying to hide from you.
Yeah. And so it's what I like because the game conceit actually lends itself to what's going on. And that's the thing. If you're going to have a final fight, it's like the whole reason there's a fight is because there is a fundamental difference of opinion and there needs to be a resolution of some kind.
Mm-hmm.
And, traditionally, if you're to the point of trying to kill each other, it's because every other type of trying to solve this problem has fallen apart.
Also, to be fair, in that game, killing each other is a much less permanent
Yes.
act.
Yeah.
And
Side question, if you guys don't mind.
Okay.
So, how many of you guys ever messed around with RPG Maker? Just out
I
of
have.
curiosity.
Yeah. I
I've just
me and
got
my friends played the one on the PlayStation.
Yeah, like I remember, like way back in the day, getting a copy of it, and I'm just curious if I'm the only one that did this. And I went and I created like an RPG, but I was like, all right, what are all the things that I hate about RPGs? About just like the storytelling, and they just made the opposite of it, and it was the worst game in the world. Like I created a game called Apathy, where it was literally the final boss was just like, and here's my plan, and the heroes were like, no. It's like, no, man, like we don't care. We're here because you kept messing with us. If you had just done nothing, we'd be back in our hometown, probably drinking ale, and you would have taken over the world. But no, you had to go do mind powers or something like that. And now we're here after an epic quest, and now we're gonna beat you up because you've put us through all of this at this point. So, congratulations, fulfilled the prophecy. Good job.
Just
and then
totally
just
lampshading all the classic tropes.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm just curious, am I the only one that ever did that in RPG Maker? Because I thought it would be funny, and it was awful.
I mean, I never really ended up making anything that could be considered a full game. I played around with like map design and stuff like that a little bit.
I knew that RPG Maker existed.
They made ridiculous boss fights where they just like to make characters that were supposed to be good characters and make them evil because, well, they were edgy teenagers. So And
that was my edgy, I'm so cool early 20s thing that I did.
Yeah, it's pretty similar in that.
I gave a couple of copies. Yeah, I gave a couple of copies to a couple of friends. They played it, and it was like 15 hours long, and they were like, "Wow." Like, I get it. Like, I get that you made this. It's kind of funny, but, like, that was really not a great game. It's like, okay. Fair enough. So, anyway, back on topic.
Yeah, but, oh, goodness, the Lavos fight.
Yeah.
I love the music to it. I love the extra challenges you can get from it, because you New Game Plus it, and you want to take it early, and to get one of the special endings, you either have to take on when you're supposed to lose to Lavos mid-game,
Mm-hmm.
you either defeat him then, or, and this is the route I like to do, you can take on Lavos with just Chrono at the very, very beginning, because on a New Game Plus, you can, have Lavos be the first battle of the whole game if you want.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
So the thing that I don't
and-
get about Lavos,
Gosh, I had so much fun just beating Lavos with just Chrono right at the very beginning. So satisfying.
I'm gonna let you finish, but the thing I don't get about Lavos is why is it the little dot on the right that's his true form?
Why wouldn't it be? You got something against
Oh, the
right dots?
core. Well, that's part of the puzzle element of that final boss fight, and it's also kind of a little bit of sleight of hand and deception. But
It's like I don't necessarily take offense to it, but it does seem just like a pretty random thing to be like, oh, and by the way, it's this random ad, or that you think is an ad, that's actually like the main target of the fight.
I don't know. I
It's-
kind of liked it.
I kind of liked it. And it's also
I
kind of
don't
the
hate
whole.
it. I just wanted to ask of like
Why does that work when
Chrono Trigger has so much of like everything has like both gameplay and narrative reasoning and everything to it. And then suddenly this is like the one thing that feels like for lack of a better term, this is one of the few things that really screams we're in a video game.
See, I can totally imagine something, creating a false, like a
A
decoy.
decoy, yeah.
Yeah.
I also like how in this boss fight, it kind of shows the whole it being an interdimensional being as it's like teleporting you in time as you're fighting it, like the background.
Well, yeah, because this is the creature that has existed through every single timeline.
And, having a decoy like that main center one, I could see that being like part of its survival mechanism. I mean, this is the, it has survived. I mean, you have to presume that Earth isn't, or whatever the name of the planet is, it's not its first planet. It's devoured.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you even see, it's spawn, which means that this is a species essentially.
Yeah.
that's concerning?
Reminiscent of, so I just watched Nazca in the Valley of the Winds for the first time all the way through just the other day, and the ohms, the massive bug creatures, are like the forces of destruction.
I actually that was actually the first game I brought up, was the one that one of the bosses was an ohm.
Oh, really? What game?
Crystalis on the NES.
Oh, interesting.
Half
Crystalis.
the bosses in that game are from Miyazaki films.
I was gonna say Miyazaki is so inspirational for so many things. A lot of later Zelda games. Crystalis, I guess that makes sense. I've only played a little bit of it on NSO.
Yeah,
But like
final
Lavos, like
final
I
dungeon
saw
is the
that and I'm
castle
just
in the
like,
sky.
oh, Lavos, okay. But not quite. Lavos is still something more even beyond that. But it
Oh,
is
yeah.
interesting to see like these familiar shapes and archetypes and whatnot becoming, taking different forms throughout the history of gaming as they then transform and then take on new meanings to players.
You know which one just came to my mind that I haven't really thought about for a while? Is Secret of Mana. That in that game you fight the Mana Beast, which you find out right at the end of the game that it's actually sort of a mega version of Flammy, your mount.
Yeah.
And so like you develop kind of this connection to Flammy. Like you rescue him as an infant, and then he comes in and rescues you once he's grown up and you're in a rough position. And and then you find out that this ultimate final boss that you have to fight is actually the same sort of thing, but it's kind of gone running rampant. And so it's not we have to defeat this ultimate evil. It's we have to put this thing down before it destroys the world.
Yeah. Secret of Mana didn't have that taking down evil. It was restoring balance,
Right.
to returning order to chaos,
Mm-hmm.
which in itself can be a valuable lesson as well.
Speaking of, that game has one of the best, not opening lines, but lines in that just stood out to me in the intro, which is the time flows like a river and history repeats.
Yeah, Secret of Mana is good. Speaking of which, Visions of Mana just came out last week. said before the end of the year. Turned out it was like that week when I said that last time.
Yeah,
You weren't
I noticed
wrong.
that.
I mean, you were
wasn't
technically
wrong.
correct.
I think it was actually that day or the next day.
Yeah, the next day I think.
See, you nailed it. Perfect.
What are we nailing?
I don't know.
Legends of Mana? I don't know.
I don't really have much more of like narrative focused final bosses. I just have like different like weird mechanical like ideas or concepts that
Okay, hit me.
are fun. So game from 1995 that I played a lot of, Mordor: The Depths of Dejanal. Are any of you familiar with MUDs?
Oh yes.
Oh yes, that's
Oh,
So
no.
this is
that's why I know you
basically a
can
MUD.
read. That's why I know for a fact Batman is wrong, and you can read in your dreams. It's entirely possible, and I
Putting
know that
in-
thanks to MUDs.
My video, mostly because it's the only video on the internet that exists of proof that this thing exists. So this is like a MUD that's taken into single player form type thing. It was like people say they basically like ripped half the code from Avatar or something and then like remade in it like a single player version of it. So the final boss, there is definitely a true final boss. It gives you like a specific text like message that pops up afterwards, but he's not a guaranteed spawn in the dungeon.
That's
So-
interesting.
So it is a so the whole game is it's one giant 15 floor, I want to say, dungeon that each floor gets basically exponentially harder than the last. But you constantly go back to town, refresh, go back down into the dungeon, the monsters respawn, you just fight. It's like an endless grind. It's a single player MUD, multi-user dungeon type thing. It was designed to kind of ape that style of gameplay. So the final boss can spawn in one of like 8 or 10 different rooms on the final floor, which are rooms that okay, I'm not going to go into the whole mechanical like explanation of it because it would make no sense. But basically, there are certain rooms that can spawn monsters from a deeper floor than where you're at. But you're at the deepest floor, so these rooms can spawn the strongest monsters in the game that can't spawn anywhere else. And a random chance for that spawn to then be Asmodeus, who is the final boss, who comes with a giant cohort of flame devils who will absolutely murder you.
Rude.
The hardest thing about beating the final boss is actually just finding him. Because, like I said, he's a random spawn on the deepest floor of the dungeon, which is nearly impossible to survive and just camp out for super long periods of time. It's designed to be, you go down, you fight some monsters there, you go all the way back up, heal back up, replenish, restore your supplies, go all the way back down again, and you get, you learn the shortcuts on how to navigate down. But it's such a weird design, and then you get to the bottom, you kill him, and then the game sends a message that is literally... One sec, let me find the message here.
That,
A winner is you.
No, it's designed into the game, the idea that, oh, you've killed him, but is it really the end of him? Because you can find him again, you can fight him again. He's like, even though today's been victorious and will be recorded in the history books, you continue on with uneasiness, wondering if there's some darker force at work. Is this really the last of Asmodeus? Because it's like, you realize that someone or something has magically taken the body. I read that out of order. So it's like, hey, you killed him, and now his body disappears. Is it really the last of him? And then you just, the game is infinite. It keeps playing, but it's so interesting to have like a quote final boss in an infinite game.
Mm-hmm.
and
Just
then
like,
it says, or was it?
yeah, exactly. And then he can drop arguably the best loot in the game, but it's like other monsters can drop it too. So I don't know.
It's an interesting thing.
Interesting conundrum of how do you make a final boss, and for some people it's arguably not even the strongest monster, but anyway.
Yeah, okay. To end it off, I'd like everyone to go through and name one boss that they struggled with, but like it was a fond struggle. For me, I've brought this up before. I could not beat Gruntilda at the end of Banjo-Kazooie, and I finally gave up because I couldn't do it. And a couple weeks later, I just told my friend, yeah, I couldn't beat her. I'm just, I got to get back and do it. But, I like fought her for like 3 hours and just couldn't get it down. And they say, oh, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm like, you know what? I want to beat it. I love this game. I got back, turned it on, beat her first try. I don't know what was going on that day that I was struggling, but the next day, no problem whatsoever. Baggins.
Metroid Prime.
Really?
Actually, no. I didn't struggle on the final boss on that one. It was
I was gonna say
it was the
Ridley.
That's right. Well, no, it wasn't Ridley either.
Oh.
It was the Phazon pirate.
The Omega Pirate.
Omega pirate, yeah.
That thing is so rough.
Yeah. The Omega Pirate's the reason why I didn't beat it until, oh goodness, I think, 5 years after I first played it? No, longer than that even. Darn
Omega Pirate's
Pirate.
why I never beat hard mode.
Okay, so since that's not a final boss, actually the one that I remember struggling with and then finally beating and absolutely loving is one we've already talked about, and that's Zeromus at the end of Final Fantasy IV.
Good old Zeromus.
Just
Must
because
use the light.
he has got some heavy hitting attacks, and so you've got to really be paying attention and curing properly and attacking. Like it's just it was a rough one. And I also played it when I was much younger, but it was a rough one. But when I beat it, it was just like, there it is.
All right, Kamizite.
See, it's kind of a tie, but it's kind of not just in the same genre, but in the same publisher company.
Okay.
And that is almost all of the final bosses in the Capcom collection of fighting games. No matter where they were. Like, just
man.
all of them.
Fighting game
because
final
the first
bosses. Holy
M.
crap.
Bison.
like
Yeah,
M. Bison
they're pretty
or
rough.
Jeddah or like any one of them or like that. Like I remember like me and my friend Jake, God rest his soul, like that was our thing. We would go and we'd do, I think I mentioned on a previous, we'd do, Chinese food, and if we didn't have a tabletop game to get to immediately, we'd go back to his place and we'd just play fighting games. And so, the Street Fighter 2s, the Street Fighter 2s Ultra Mega, the Super Street Fighter 2s, Darkstalkers, Night Warriors, Darkstalkers 3, the Night Warriors, etc., 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 etc. Like, we'd always play these, like, Capcom games, Project Justice, Rival Schools, and always, like, that last boss, like, would always just kick your butt the first 4 or 5 times, learning what it was. It was like the pre-gender to the Dark Souls
Yeah, and they
type,
have
type of
completely
game.
unfair moves.
But like when you finally beat them, accomplishment all over.
Well, it's because you have no choice but to just get good.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, Lunasaur.
I'll say I have a bit of a tie as well. The first one is not so much because of the difficulty of the boss, but just because of the circumstance of the game. In Lufia 2, first time I played it, I just had a 3-day rental, so I was rushing through the game, and I was severely underleveled, and I couldn't kill him, and so I wasn't able to.
That must have felt like being naked to you.
Yeah, and well, yeah, man. And so to actually beat that game, I had to find a friend that had it, borrow it from him, play through the entire game again, and be properly leveled and beat it. But
I don't know. I don't know what you're talking about. I beat that final boss at the very beginning of the first game.
Well, yes. That's why my whole I want to see the end was so ironic when I finally played the first game and realized, dang it, I went through the whole game to see the end that happens at the first 5 minutes of the first game. Blah. But here's the other one, and this one is one that I could not do until I eventually decided to play with save states on an emulator because I could never, ever, ever beat this game as a kid. Ever. Zelda 2, The Adventure of Link, its final boss,
Yeah.
Shadow Link, and well, get through the Thunderbird and then take on Shadow Link. I mean, in if I'm perfectly honest, even with save states, I eventually had to do the cheese strat that I had since learned that obviously I didn't know as a kid. The duck in a corner and just crouch in the corner and stab. Don't move. Just keep attacking and you'll win. But just to actually try and beat him by actually like getting up, jumping, and sword fighting and moving around like you're supposed to.
Oh,
Good
hard.
grief, he's hard. So yeah, no, he's yeah. Shadow Link from Zelda 2, definite winner. That one remained unconquered by me for over 2 decades because he's that brutal.
Mythical.
Again, hard time deciding between stuff. So I will. There's 2 that I didn't beat fairly, and 1 that I did. The one that I did, I think, is a well-designed boss. The 2 that I didn't are not. Um, and people will fight me on this, but I'll rapid fire them. 1, Doom Eternal, the Icon of Sin,
Yes.
is just not a fun fight without Sentinel armor. I'm sorry.
Fair.
Maybe it's.
Fair. No,
It's
I
not
won't fight you
fun
on that
without
one.
the Sentinel armor because there's just too much randomness and too much stuff going on for you to really, yeah. If he summons an Archvile, you're just done. Second one that is just not fun, Fire Emblem Conquest on Lunatic. I still have yet to beat without taking someone's hacked unit to kill the final boss because that whole level is just designed to make you hate the game unless you basically planned your entire run from like the first couple levels. It's so poorly designed and I hate it.
But what's one
Oh.
you enjoyed?
One that I enjoy that I struggled with and took me like 4 full attempts of going into the final dungeon, doing the final boss rush until I finally killed it, including a lot of grinding between, Octopath Traveler. The Dark God in Octopath Traveler.
See,
If you
I've gotten through all of chapter 5 of all of the stories, and now I'm just like I'm kind of done.
I will say, if in my mind, the Dark God takes some of the best elements, mechanically speaking, of both Kefka and Exdeath, in terms of, I would say some of, you can fight me on the whole epic scale and all the build up and everything of that, whatever. But in terms of like, you have to use all 8 party members. It's not like Kefka where, oh, you set up your order, but you can just blitz through with your big 4 if you're strong enough. No, your first 4 take on the first form, and your second 4 take on the second form. And that's it. And if one of them wipes, game over. The first time I went through that dungeon, I just got wiped by the first form. The second time, I beat the first form, but my B team was not nearly strong enough to take on the second form. The third time, okay, maybe it was just 3 times. The third time, I had to grind for like 20 to 30 extra levels, go out, get every capture every rare beast on Haunted, try to find, memorize every apothecary recipe that I needed, all this type of prep work, whatever.
And
to
that's why
barely scrape by the first form, and then also barely scrape by the second form with my A team on the second form. And it was an absolutely brutal fight, the most difficult fight I've ever done in a turn-based RPG like that I have succeeded. And it was the most epic feeling to finally take it down and be like, I have completed this game.
Yeah, see, and I just that's why I didn't really end up finishing it, because I'm just like, well, I don't like, there are just certain characters that I don't enjoy playing, and that I, in when I was playing through their chapters, I was able to have them and then the rest of my A team. And in
Totally
this, I'm just
fair.
I'm sorry, Haunted is not fun to play for me.
Fair enough. It's all about. It was all about for me finding a secondary job that would allow them to be useful, or I got to a point where one of the parts of the first forms, because it has multiple phases, is it's you played Final Fantasy VI. You remember the four crystals of each of them are like a different element. Where it's like each one will like absorb one element and then be weak to another and then be neutral to the other two.
Okay.
Do you remember that from Final Fantasy VI?
I remember that from finding Culex.
Sorry, I got
No, that's
distracted.
Final Fantasy V. Never mind. Sorry,
Oh.
I'm blending together which game these are from. It's still whatever. That's from 5. But anyway, it does a form like that where it's like there are 6 things. Each of them has a different weakness. To the different, elements or attack types or whatnot, and you have to basically figure out in the fight which one is what, because they will kind of change and rotate, and try to kill them all close to the same time. Doesn't have to be like in the same turn or anything, but like close to the same time, I think was what you had to do. I forget. I just had either Honnet or Olivia, the dancer.
Primrose.
Primrose. It was P. Yeah, Primrose. Just throwing consumable items, just the top tier of consumable item, just because like, look, I don't have any other way for you to contribute in this phase of the fight. Just throw a Zeus's Wrath and deal something. But I found use for like every single element of that game in that fight, and it was like I said, that's one of the few times in an RPG where I feel like I've had to interact with every element that the game gives you.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I like that fight so much. But I also totally understand it is multiple hours of grind just to get to the level where you're able to fight it, not including getting everyone equipped, getting everything that you would need for that and all of that.
Well, and that's the other thing is I didn't really care to go and unlock the additional classes.
Oh.
The 3 classes at the very end.
4.
Oh, there were 4? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, there were 4 secret ultra jobs.
Okay.
In that game. Yeah.
But I didn't care because like I remember I was playing. I was like, I'm enjoying this, but not enough to want to immerse myself in it.
Fair.
And mainly because it was frustrating to have this party of multiple people and their only actual interaction is in these weird little side cutscenes that are optional. That it just was like, this doesn't feel like an actual party. It feels like 8 individuals. And when you're playing through any one individual story, the others just kind of go blank.
Yeah, I acknowledge that. I haven't played Octopath 2 yet. I've heard from some people that they do a better job with that, but I'm keeping myself spoiler free until I eventually pick it up.
Yeah, I'm planning to do 2 just because I'm hoping that that's the case. So,
All right.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, let us all get our promotions done. This has been a fun discussion. Final bosses are fun. We will do more discussions of bosses at a later date, but due to how big that topic is, we'll probably be breaking it down by game series or something similar. That one needs a dividing line.
Yeah, just general bosses because at least with final bosses, you limit it to 1 per game.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Kamisite, would you like to promote anything?
Yes, I would. I have a really great friend, really great partner. She is in a contest right now over on Tapas. She is writing a story, and unlike the last time, she has a full 4 months to do it instead of doing 30 chapters in 30 days, which was fun for her and all of us. But go over to Tapas and search for the series Entangled Enemies, which I've also put in the self-promotion portion of the Spring Discord. Her name is Karina J. And it is a fantasy, action fantasy, romantic fantasy story. Check it out. Give her some likes. Read the stories. Give her some comments. Show her some love.
All right.
And give Splice some bacon. His salt intake is low today.
I am not opposed to this. All right, Lunasar.
Yeah, I'll promote Lizzie's stream. And yeah, Lizzie Petrichor at Twitch. And she's got Chill Vibes doing shiny hunting. She had a pretty long streak of getting a shiny every stream for a while, doing the Masuda method with eggs, but her streak was sadly broken. Trying to
Sadness.
trying to get the why not, a shiny why not, but yeah, good times.
All right, Mithril.
Instead of promoting my channel, because I figure everyone knows where to find me at, I'm going to promote the StarCraft Brood War esports, Afrika TV esports. They have English casting still. It is fantastic, and if you have any interest in RTS games at all, this is the original RTS esport. Y'all should watch it. It's fantastic, and they do a really good job of explaining what's going on, even if you're not super in-depth and in the know.
All right, Baggins.
The Sandersonian Institute of Cosmere Studies. It's a Brandon Sanderson podcast that features myself, Splice, and another friend of ours named Amy. And we talk about Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere. And yeah, it's loaded with spoilers, so just as a heads up on that. But we've been going through the preview chapters that Brandon's been releasing as we head up to Stormlight 5, which is the ending of the first arc in the Stormlight Archive. And it's getting interesting.
Yeah, just a little bit. All right, and you can find me, of course, on Twitch and Kick under the name Splice Stream. Tomorrow we're doing hopefully some Amiibo Raid Boss Tower. And on Saturday, which I think would appeal to people who'd listen to this, Quizzard, which is my video game trivia, which I'm quite proud of.
If you haven't played yet, go for it.
Really should.
You know what? I think I underleveled.